Okay, awesome. Great. All right, let's kick things off then. So this is LIP call number 7, and let's jump right into the agenda. I'll share the agenda in the chat just for anyone that doesn't have it already open. So the first section for today are our LIP candidates. So let's just go straight off the top. The first one is LIP 25, which is the Extensible governance contract proposal, which proposes a new governance contract that enables multi-step upgrades to our smart contracts as well as delayed upgrade execution. And this is a proposal that Nico is the champion of. And before handing it off to him, just want to mention that we recently completed a short external security review with an independent contractor for this contract. So that was completed earlier this week, and a short report was produced with no major findings except for a few notes for considerations. These aren't problems with the contract per se, but suggestions that can help with flexibility of the contract moving forward. So that report was produced, and I believe we have a few small actionable items from that report to incorporate into the contract. So just wanted to share with everyone that we have completed the scheduled external security review for this contract. Happy to answer any questions about that, but otherwise I'll first pass it off to Nico, who is the champion of this proposal. So Nico, feel free to share any updates or thoughts that you have on this proposal that may or may not be related to the recently completed external security review.
Right. So yeah, there was actually not much change apart from that security review, and I already followed up with the necessary code changes that were highlighted in that review. So the PR itself for the contract requires a re-review to check out those latest changes. After that is done, it should be good to go. The LIP itself has been in last call since the previous LIP call, actually. So we can once the PR is reviewed, we can actually move this to a vote pretty quickly.
Great. So I think the LIP itself is ready to move into the proposed status. We've completed the security review that we wanted to complete. I guess the one thing worth considering is the timing for the poll creation for this proposal, mainly because this proposal does introduce this notion of delayed execution. And I believe in the current language used in the proposal that the delay effectively ends up being somewhere around 5 to 6 days. So after an update is staged, it would be able to be executed after that time period. And I think the original intention was for it to give people sufficient time to unbond if they disagree with a particular update that was staged. So I think that part of the proposal makes sense, but thinking ahead a little bit about the other LIPs that we're working on that are very heavily targeted towards the gas price issues on Ethereum mainnet, we know that there's a greater sense of urgency around those proposals, and we're working hard to move those LIPs through the process and get implementations that we're confident in ready for deployment. But knowing that there's a greater amount of urgency with those proposals, I think it's worth bringing up how that gels with the fact that LIP 25 would be introducing an additional time period that one would need to wait before any additional LIPs need to be deployed. So I just wanted to bring that up as a topic for discussion before sharing my own thoughts. Yeah, curious if anyone has any thoughts on that topic.
Right. So the delay period discussed in the proposal is actually 1.5 times the unbonding period. So that amounts to, I think, around 10 days, and the unbonding period is somewhere like 6 days with the current block times. In terms of imposing that delay or not for the upcoming LIPs that address gas efficiencies or inefficiencies rather, the delay itself is socially enforced, right? So those proposals could take into account um, not setting a delay for their upgrade, and that could be part of the proposal, and then that could be voted on as such. One thing I would like to add for the LIP 25 proposal itself is that one thing I do plan to add still is the upgrade path for the actual deployment of LIP 25 itself.
Yeah, I like the idea of incorporating. So I like the idea of incorporating the delay as a part of a particular LIP at the moment, while that delay is still a socially enforced convention. This is just something that, well, we can talk about whether other people agree with that idea, but if that is something that we push forward with, we would just need to incorporate that into the language of the LIP itself, right? Because that's not something that's actually specified in the language of LIP 25 right now. So if we decide to do that, we should probably express that in the LIP 25 document itself, that delay is something that would be specified in a proposal associated with the update.
Not to like move on to the other issues themselves, but I do think there's a real sense of urgency around and like community attention on the gas cost reduction LIPs, more so than on this, which is more of like a stepping stone or building block on the path to fully decentralizing protocol updates. And so I actually don't think it's a bad idea to just hold off on making the official, like we can move it into the proposed state if we want, but to actually make the official proposal and have the voting period begin, we might want to wait to do that until after the gas cost reduction issues have been put through anyway.
That's an option indeed. Although I would say that one thing that LIP 25 gives us is like a much easier upgrade path because it allows for batch transactions. So imagine when we need to deploy a new contract, for example, the new bonding manager contract, we also need to register it with the controller. All of that could be batched within like a single update on chain, right? So that could make our lives a little bit easier. But yeah, what you mentioned is definitely an option as well.
Got it.
Yeah, I think those are both really good points. I think the other thing to take into consideration is just what we think the voter turnout will be if we created a poll for LIP 25 now for like 500 GA, right?
Right. What would the dollar cost be to cast a vote?
Luckily, the on-chain votes themselves are pretty cheap, but they'll still be more expensive with the absurdly high gas prices. So yeah, it's hard to say if it's hard to say if how much that will affect the voter turnout, but also couple that with the fact that like this update itself is probably not something that is front of mind for a lot of people in terms of importance. I wonder if those are like two factors that we should take into consideration, where not only is it really expensive, not only is it more expensive to vote right now, but this is also something that's not front of mind for a lot of people relative to what is on their mind, which is like the gas cost reduction issues.
Right. I think more about it just in terms of like keeping engagement and momentum and voter excitement around governance. Like you don't want to have the next thing that you ask people to pay attention to and vote on be something that they're forced to spend a significant amount of money to cast the vote. And it's not the thing that they're looking for in terms of an update that's going to make a big impact. So I'd be inclined, if possible, just to hold it back until after the gas reduction polls are at least active, if not completed.
One thing I would add though is that we might end up in the same situation for the gas optimization proposals as well, because a vote right now at like 500 GWay will probably be around, I don't know, $8, $9, maybe a little bit more. So there might be like a situation whereby people just think, oh, I'll just wait for someone else to vote. And if we reach quorum and this proposal passes, I don't have to vote. And if a lot of people take that stance, we will just not reach quorum, right?
But I think they have a clear incentive to make this one pass and reach quorum because their tokens are locked up, and it literally would take $2,000 to claim, their earnings right now for over a couple of years. Whereas if this passes, they can claim it for just a couple bucks. So, and withdraw token, right? So there's a real incentive for them to participate in the gas cost reduction votes.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. After discussing these points, I think I agree that it makes sense to make the trade-off of like not having more seamless upgrades for the gas optimization proposals, and just pushing the vote for LIP 25 until after we complete the vote for the gas optimization proposals. That feels like an okay trade-off to me. It just means that we'll need to do more manual operations for the upgrades for the gas optimization proposals, but that seems reasonable to me. Does anyone strongly disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that necessarily, but we'll just, if gas prices stay the same, we'll just end up in the same situation after we deploy the gas optimizations as well for LIP 25 it is. So maybe since the voting part, or at least the voting contract, isn't like a big part of, like it isn't tied to the live peer protocol in any way, it might be actually interesting to move that to a sidechain or something just to reduce the costs.
Yeah, I think we can certainly talk about that. I think the point around pushing off the LIP 25 vote is more about like generating more voter momentum and interest, as opposed to like, yeah, the cost situation could still be the same down the line, but I think the idea is that there's probably more momentum that can be generated in terms of interest if the next proposals that go up for a vote are more tied with the current environment around gas prices.
Yeah, and you'll have like thousands more stakeholders that are kind of activated and not underwater on their claiming costs versus token value after those go through, who may be more energized to participate in the LIP 25 vote as well.
Cool. So if there's no strong disagreements with that, then I think for now we'll say that we'll hold off on the LIP 25 vote until after the various gas optimization proposal votes, and I think we're in a good spot with it anyway. We've completed the security review and we've already addressed the necessary changes. We can certainly do the quick re-review so that the code is basically frozen, but we'll just hold off on the vote until after the other proposals are farther along.
Yeah, and last thing I would just say is like, this is an open and community driven and decentralized process. So if anyone makes a PR to move it to proposed status, like the editor should probably move it along. And if they want to pay the 100 LPT in order to create a poll, like they can. But I just think like this group maybe came to consensus that doing that after the gas cost reduction polls might be more effective.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can still move it into proposed because technically it's ready to be in proposed. It's just that no one on this call plans on creating a poll for it, although someone else could certainly create a poll for it if they wanted to.
Yep.
Cool. So I'll jot that down and I'll make sure that is clear in the notes. All right, let's move on to the various gas cost proposals then. So the first one up is LIP 36, cumulative earnings claiming. So this is the proposal that addresses some of the gas cost issues going forward. So after this proposal is deployed, instead of earnings claiming instead of the cost of earnings claiming rising with the number of rounds that elapse, becomes a constant time operation. And I was the original champion of this, but Joe has been working a lot on the implementation and making various updates to the spec. The one update I'll share around this LIP is that we're currently shooting to get to a code/spec freeze at the end of this week, and it might overflow to the beginning of next week. But in this time frame, we're trying to get to a code and spec freeze, and the plan is to go through a security review process starting in the middle of next week, and from there, hopefully get to like the frozen state of the code that would be ready to open a poll for this proposal. So I think at this point, given the current state of the spec and current state of the code, the proposal is currently in a draft status. I'd be comfortable moving it into last call and using that period to accept any additional feedback if anyone has any. But I don't think there's a harm in starting the last call period like today, as we continue getting to a code and spec freeze and as we go into the security process. Nico, do you have, since you've been working a lot on the spec and implementation as well, do you have any of your own thoughts about timeline or anything to add or update on?
No, I think we covered most of it. We started the review process for the PR this week. So indeed, hoping to get to a code freeze by the end of the week or early next week by the latest. So yeah, not much to add on that front.
Right, so the timeline would be the 26th would be the potential date that a proposal could pass, and the updates could be deployed.
So, right, if it goes into last call today, then it would go into proposed on the 13th, and then 10 days from the 13th is
the 23rd, except I was figuring the security audit wasn't going to be done till the 16th.
Yeah, right. So, okay, 16th. Yep. Yeah, 26th.
So yeah, that might indeed be the earliest date, but given that if there's like feedback from the security review that we need to address, then this might be out for a couple of more days, but we'll see, I guess.
Right, yeah, we'll look at the calendar and take into account like the timing of when it would make sense to actually conduct a protocol update based on what's going on as well.
Cool. So our optimistic fast track timeline would have a deployment on the 26th, but we'll see what the security review yields and see from there. Anyone else have any comments or questions about LIP 36 before we move on? We'll also have an opportunity to maybe loop back to LIP 36 briefly because it might be relevant for the discussion for the earnings snapshot proposal. LIP 52. Cool. So let's move on to LIP 52 then. So this is the earnings snapshot proposal, and Doug was the original champion of this, and Nico has basically been kind of like the technical co-champion, working on the specification in order to realize the ideas put forth in the original proposal. I listed a few questions or notes that I thought would be helpful to guide the discussion. But before getting there, Doug or Nico, do you want to share an update on where this proposal is at with the rest of the group?
Sure. So thanks, Nico, for picking up the ball on the kind of official proposal and technical implementation. You can give any updates on that front. The one thing I was considering was, you know, Jan and I were chatting about kind of expedited timeline for getting these gas cost reduction fixes potentially deployed, wanting to do the snapshot proposal at the same time as the claim earnings update so that users get kind of the full bang for their buck in terms of these improvements. But in order to do that, my big concern would actually not be with the protocol update itself that enables this. It would be with our client work and the ability for users to actually have a good experience in just like clicking a button to get up to date on their earnings. And, you know, it's a pretty short timeline. And, you know, we're limited on resources in terms of front end development. So what we wanted to talk about and discuss whether the right path was to like fully update the Explorer for day one and have that be a priority and be in our workflow, or whether there was like a quicker and dirtier path, like a, you know, single page DApp where users just click a button with their MetaMask account to invoke this, you know, snapshot based claim earnings shortcut, and then they go back to the Explorer to do everything going forward. The old methodology will still be supported. So if they're in the Explorer, it's not like they'll have a you know, broken experience, but they could just get a shortcut by using a tool if we don't have time to do the full Explorer update. That's, you know, an option. You know, there's even there's other options where there's just a quick command line tool, or there's instructions for how to interact with the protocol smart contracts directly through my crypto or Etherscan. So it's really just thinking through like the UX and the experience we want users to have when this becomes available. Adam, I don't know if you've given any thought to that or been aware of this timeline at all, but would be curious to hear your initial reactions.
Yeah, Yandin shared with me some of the thinking around the UX. And I don't think it would be that much work to add support to the Explorer. It's really, from my perspective, just like it's introducing like one new method, which is like claiming the snapshot or submitting the snapshot transaction. So yeah, I was thinking this could even happen like behind the scenes. So when users like stakes or unstakes, they wouldn't even know necessarily that transaction is like happening. But yeah, in terms of like timeline, it feels like maybe a few days of front end work.
Well, I think you'd have to just be like prepared with the data, well prepared in advance, right? It's like you have to construct this Merkle proof, which is fine if we do it in advance, and just for any user, you can look up in a database or a text file what their proof is so that you can just easily submit it. But that's, again, it's like a project to integrate and build this that hasn't really been budgeted for.
Right. Yeah, definitely needs to be taken into account before ideally even before it like goes up for a vote or during the vote.
Yeah, I don't know if the vote needs to take into account like when it would be available on the front end, because as long as those like protocol contracts are deployed, anyone could theoretically interact with it. It's more just making us aware of this for like your own kind of planning and prioritization and time estimations as well. So that we can choose whether to do something, you know, integrated in the UI, which it sounds like you have a reaction that it, you know, is tractable, versus doing something quicker outside of the main UI.
Yeah, I think it would even be quicker to do it within the existing UI.
Cool.
Just because it already exists and it wouldn't necessitate like introducing a new UI for users.
Cool. Okay, that's good feedback.
I think the other thing worth noting is from a work perspective, the work that one would need to do in order to generate all the proofs, so all the data generation will need to be done anyway. Like it's a prerequisite for the proposal in the first place. So just like worth noting that like that's not like if we choose to just like be able to do lookups for address for proofs, like the work that would need to be done in order to generate those proofs in the first place would have already been completed. So yeah, just worth taking into account that like that wouldn't be additional work that we would need to do. Although the additional work that we need to do is like the lookups.
Yep.
Cool. Doug, anything else that you want to share about the Snapshot proposal before Nico talks about some of the technical components?
Only that to be on the same timeline that we're talking about for the other update, we have to move pretty quickly. So I know Nico's working on this, but it's, we'd want to formalize the proposal and put it into last call in the next couple of days, right? And then we'd want to have the implementation and the Merkle roots and data available for verification when it's proposed within 10 days of that. So just that we'd have to get hustling, but if we can do it, I think it's a big win for everyone.
Right. So I think that might be a good segue to switch over to Nico. Do you want to talk a bit about where the kind of spec for this is at and how you see the implementation work looking forward?
Right. So there's a draft LIP out for this that currently contains the technical spec. So there's discussions that can take place over there. In terms of the implementation, it should be considerably less complex than LIP 36, although in the spec it is marked that LIP 36 is a prerequisite for this LIP. The reason being that I intend for the current snapshot round to be the round, or at least the end of the round before the LIP 36 upgrade round, which would allow skipping iterative claiming entirely. So that's currently where it's at. In terms of timeline, I think we could complete the contract work pretty quickly. It's not that much work. I think the considerations around the client side stuff is a little bit more work, perhaps.
Right. And I think it's the case that for this proposal, given that the on-chain components are, the scope of the on-chain components is relatively small, that it feels reasonable to me to kind of move forward with this implementation of this proposal without also doing an external security review, and instead dedicating resources internally to just make sure that we're confident in it. And if that's the case, that means we don't have to also worry about the timeline for additional security review for this proposal. So from a time perspective, the only security review time that we have to worry about is the one for LIP 36. Cool. One thing about, so since we've been talking a bunch about like timeline and timing, this is thinking ahead a little bit, but when we get to the point where we need to vote for LIP 36 and 52, we know that we want to deploy them at the same time or shortly one after the other, because 52 depends on 36. I think that brings up a choice that we have, which is the two LIPs could be bundled such that users would only need to vote on that parent LIP that encompasses both of these proposals, or we could not do that and just have users vote on each of the LIPs separately. And the benefit of the former is definitely that you only have to worry about voting in one poll, one less transaction that you would need to submit if you vote. The benefit of the latter is that you give people the ability to make their own decision on each individual proposal, which might be relevant in this particular case just because one contains, the snapshots, like some people may agree with the earnings claiming going forward, but may not like the state snapshot. Not saying that this will necessarily be the case, but that is one benefit of the latter, which is gives people the ability to kind of make individual decisions on individual proposals as opposed to lumping everything together. So yeah, just wanted to bring that up because I think we're not at that point yet, but we have the option of deciding to do two separate polls or one single. Does anyone have any immediate reaction to that?
I don't have any strong reaction. I think you articulated the trade-offs. I don't anticipate these being controversial, but I could see, like, if it was discovered that there was a mistake in the balances within the stink snapshot, then people would want to vote no for that while passing the other. But if we avoid a mistake, then I think we'll be in good shape if they're together.
Anyone else have any thoughts on this topic? Okay. Yeah, I don't feel particularly strongly about it right now. I'd be comfortable. Well, I'm also not. Yeah, I'd be comfortable kind of leaving it as is and having people vote on them separately for now. But there can always be the decision made as we move forward in the next week or two to bundle them together if anyone's mind changes. Cool. So that's the earnings snapshot proposal. Any last remaining thoughts on this before we move on to the last LIP candidate? All right, so the last LIP candidate is the LIP 56, reward period. So this is a new LIP that I created a draft for this morning that emerged from the forum post that I created earlier this week or last week, kind of exploring some ideas around how we can reduce the cost of reward distribution on the network. So LIP 36 and 52 try to adjust the cost of claiming earnings. LIP 56, the reward period, tries to offer some cost reductions for reward distribution, which applies to orchestrators that are calling reward every round or every day right now. So the basic gist of the proposal is that right now orchestrators have to call reward every round. The proposal introduces the notion of a reward period, which lasts for, in the proposal, 7 rounds, although that length is adjustable if needed, but for now, let's say that it's 7 rounds. So instead of an orchestrator calling reward every round, it would call reward every 7 rounds. And during those 7 rounds, during this reward period, rewards would continue to be minted every round, except they accumulate. And those rewards would accumulate until the last round of the reward period, which the proposal refers to as the reward round. And then orchestrators would only need to call reward in that final round. And if they are active in that final round, then they are able to obtain a share of the rewards that were minted during the reward period. So the accumulation of all the rewards minted in each of those previous rounds. And the way that this addresses, the way that this reduces cost for orchestrators is that with a 7-day reward period, it effectively results in a 7x reduction in the per round reward call cost. So the reward call cost is only incurred once every 7 days instead of every day. So that's the basic gist of the proposal. I created a draft for it this morning, and I've also included a draft implementation with it. And that's where this proposal is currently at. I haven't received too much feedback. I've received some feedback from Doug, but I haven't received too much feedback from the rest of the community. So my current plan is to continue pushing forward with this proposal and flesh out the implementation and probably move it into last call pretty soon, since the last call period can still be used in order to accept any additional feedback. But the main reason for moving a little quicker there is for similar reasons as 36 and 52. There's a stronger sense of urgency around anything pertaining to gas cost issues. And yeah, so I'm planning on moving quickly here and fleshing out the implementation. And I don't see any dependencies on anything else for this proposal right now. So it's open for feedback. The draft is available, and yeah, that's that. That's my update on LIP 56.
Did you arbitrarily pick 7 days, or was there any sort of thinking behind that?
It's a bit arbitrary. I mainly chose it from ease of understanding standpoint when I think about units of time. So 7 days results in like still a sizable reduction in the effective per round cost, but a week seems like a reasonable time unit. I'm open to hearing other suggestions. 1 week just was like my original, kind of arbitrary choice.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything against it. I was just wondering if there was any reason for 7 as opposed to another.
Has anyone seen any precedents from other protocols that distribute rewards at some interval that's like longer than a day, and how the community reacts or accepts that?
Yeah, Synthetics has 7 days, for example, but if I remember correctly, they don't have automatic accumulating rewards. So you would have to restake your rewards, but that's another matter, but they have 7 days.
Yeah, another project that has longer time periods for rewards is 0x. So for their staking protocol, the length of an epic right now in 0x, I think, is a week. And the rewards there are denominated in Ether that's accumulated on their marketplace and shared with their stakers. So I believe it's a week right now, and I think it was actually longer previously. I think it was like a week and a half or 2 weeks, and they had a governance proposal back in the spring to reduce it to 1 week.
Yeah, they moved it from 10 to 7.
Looping back to that, I assume that the reward periods parameter would also be a parameter that can fall under protocol governance.
Yeah. So right now in the proposal, it is something that's adjustable. So you can move it via governance. So it's something that could be changed in the future if people want to change the default value. So for example, if we ever wanted to go back to a reward period, if we ever wanted to go back to calling reward every day, you would change the reward period to 1 round. And it would result in the same system that we have today. Cool. So yeah, that's where LIP 56 is at. As I mentioned, definitely welcome any additional feedback, and I'm going to share in the community governance channel in Discord that the draft is now available in case anyone didn't see the original forum post. So definitely want to see if there's any feedback, and I've highlighted some of the trade-offs that are made in the proposal itself. So there's a section at the end that talks about some of the downsides and like differences from the current system. At the moment, I feel like it's a reasonable trade, but I've highlighted them anyway in case anyone wants to focus on them specifically. But besides that, gonna try to move quickly here to get an implementation ready, and if there's any feedback that comes in, I can try to incorporate it as is necessary. Any remaining comments or thoughts about LIP 56? All right, if not, then that wraps up the LIP candidate section. So we've talked about all the outstanding LIPs that are in progress. The final section to wrap up the call is the open discussion period, so 5 to 10 minutes for topics that are not on the agenda, but anyone that wants to bring up that can be added to the agenda for the next call. So the floor is open if anyone wants to bring something up now.
Has anyone thought about what an appropriate process might look like or mechanism might look like for fast tracking the gas cost reduction issues even beyond the time frame that we have open right now?
So Yeah, what would that look like? We make a change to the socially agreed upon rules for the governance process and reduce the length of the last call period and or the length of the poll.
Yeah, I mean, this is more of an open question to brainstorm. Like, would it be justifiable if the proposal itself included some very explicit language about that the community was voting on, and if they voted yes, then they were agreeing to fast track it? Or is there any way to get social consensus on that really quickly in order to have it take effect by the time the voting for this poll goes into place? Like if we put an LIP in last call today about fast tracking some upcoming gas change issues with a shorter voting period or something like that. Brainstorming, I'm not advocating for anything, but just getting creative here. If there's any way to get this value delivered to users faster.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the fastest way to do that might be to create a LIP to adjust the last call period or the poll period.
Right. And so that would take, I don't know how much impact it would have. It would take 20 days from now to approve at the fastest. That would be the 23rd. Could an active poll then be, ended by the 23rd if it wasn't made? Like if it went live before this fast track proposal was accepted.
So you're saying that there could be a chance that sorry, could you explain that again? I'm not sure if I caught that.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, let's say the fast track proposal said, like, if accepted, then active proposals on that are currently open for voting would be acceptable to end early and be executed because before this, like, proposal about expediting the process passed, the other proposals would actually have to be live. So they'd be like live with a long voting period, but then if this proposal was accepted, then it would shorten the voting period on the others, but they'd already be active. It feels messy. I'm just trying to think out loud if there's any way to like put the puzzle pieces together to keep it clean.
Yeah.
Like, there's still an unknown here. Like we don't have the audit results back yet, right? And that might affect the timelines. There might be more work to do. So not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but yeah, interested in trying to find a way.
Yeah, I think no matter what, in order to make any of these changes while complying with the current governance process, there will be a 20-day delay no matter what. So that seems like the reality. So yeah, I would have to think a little more about like the contents of a proposal that one would try to pass within 20 days that would actually be effective. I'm not sure.
Right. So I think that the thing that we can do to best keep options open at the moment, though, is just get these proposals into last call as soon as possible.
Yep.
Because even then, there's still, a 10-day period before the proposal where changes can be made if necessary.
Yep. Agreed. And then I think we can list as a, well, I think either way, like, I mean, it's particularly pertinent because there's a greater sense of urgency around these proposals, but I think this topic of the length of the poll period and the length of the last call period and how it kind of hampers progress in situations like this is something that's like worth thinking about regardless. And then the fact that we have these highly pertinent and urgent issues just makes it even more relevant. So I think that's something that maybe we can all have a takeaway from this call for, and we can individually brainstorm and see if we come up with something that would be better than the current status quo.
Yep, sounds good.
I imagine any change to this would require updates to LIP1 or LIP0. Don't know which one it is. So that would entail a proposal itself that would need to be passed and voted on, right? So that might not be, I don't know, that might not be achievable within the current timeline we have set for these gas optimization LIPs.
Yeah, and I think that's what was pointed out with like there would need to be a 20-day delay no matter what if the governance process is adhered to, at least as is currently defined. But seems still worthwhile to think through, like, is there anything that can be done that's useful for the urgency of these proposals that we have on the table today? And B, regardless of the urgency of the proposals that we have on the table today, it seems like we're, like, as developers, a little handicapped by the length of the poll period and last call period in situations like this. So it makes it worthwhile to consider if there's anything that can be changed that's useful, not only in the short term, but also later on as well.
Cool. And we clearly still have a lot of work to do to get confidence in the fact that these updates that we're deploying actually will be secure, reliable, won't break anything, and the client side updates to support them too. So it sounds like the gains by focusing on a shortcut mechanism might not be worth it because it might only get us a day or two, which won't make a huge difference anyway.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's still worthwhile to like have that as a takeaway that this is a problem, but yeah, maybe we don't necessarily need to spend too many mental cycles on it if we have other things on our plate already. Cool.
Well, lastly, once we have a timeline for this, I think it's worth considering whether there's anything that's outside of governance that can actually help solve some of the issues that some of the current classes of users are facing. For example, there might be ways to ensure that the like orchestrators can stay engaged and continue to generate LPT for everyone through, you know, subsidizing the cost in some way, or yeah, we could take it offline, but it's easier to do that when there's a known timeline, like 20 days, than it is when there's a unknown infinite potential timeline of high gas prices. So something we can think through.
Yeah, and I'm sure like between that and I think that just like falls under the class of like the many additional things that we'll need to continue to do outside of these proposals. So yeah, I think that's a good point. We can definitely keep pressing forward there. Cool. Any last remaining thoughts before we close out the meeting? Awesome. If not, then I think we can end the meeting here then. Thanks everyone for joining this latest LIP call. We'll upload notes, recording online, and see everyone on the next one.
Yep. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.
I guess.
Yeah.